The parallels immediately divide between a William Wallace and an Osama bin Laden is attacking the innocents as a target to hurt the people that love those innocents and what they represented, and doing it for religious ideology or something else that cannot be proven. What Wallace wanted was freedom for his country, and he'd had a taste of it, and he lost it. And then he had seen the abuses by the English, and he snapped. And I'm with him on all that. This book is going to be very pro-Wallace. I'm warning you now, because I'm taking my artistic license. I'm in touch with people right now in Scotland. We're getting the facts right. I'm getting the timeline right. But the parts we don't know, Kev's filling it. That's why I'm calling it fiction. And I'll put that in the foreword. But I'm going to get crazy with it, because there needs to be an overwhelming emotion that comes from this book to the reader, because that was an overwhelmingly emotional time for the Scots and the English. But that's a different story. But there's a funny little comparison, because how can we try to apply our terminology, which is always limited? We're always coming up with new words that describe old things and new words that describe new things, to say that atoms and atomic particles aren't stuff. Well, they're not stuff that you can put in a drawer, maybe, but they're still something. They're still physical, are they not? Then they're stuff. They're stuff by my definition. So my scientific mind leans against what Deepak Chopra was saying, in that if it ain't stuff, you can't call it stuff. And nothing comes from nothing. There's something else there we haven't identified that is not stuff. I'm sure there are a lot of things we've identified that isn't physically stuff. But to assume and to make the leap in logic that if something cannot be defined, it must be God is a little wacky to me. There are many steps between what I know right now and what it would take for me to learn to believe in an omnipotent and omniscient creator. A lot of stuff, people. A lot of stuff to get me to that level. And you could say, well, what if God just showed up? Well, how would I know it wasn't a fucking hologram? I mean, how would I know anything? Our knowing is bent anyway. Andrew knows things and Rick knows things in a different way than I know things. I have a very high mark when it comes to learning new things, especially for the evidential requirement. I need a lot of it. And I need it because we've made so many mistakes in the past thinking something was real, and it wasn't. And that's why I'm one of the people that's saying about climate change and say, this is real. This is real. We got this down. We got this math and science down. This is some real shit happening. And a lot of people don't want to hear that because they've listened to their right-wing networks and they don't want to hear it. They think it's fake. This one's not fake, folks. There are plenty of things that the left wing does and liberals and liberal elites and Democrats that are not that are disingenuous. This isn't one of them. But this one's the real deal. And forget the politics. The way to do this is get away from people who have ulterior motives and get into the people that study this shit for a living and have to come up with the right answers, because the day they miss the right answer, they're disqualified, they lose credibility. And you're going to hear in a lot of arguments about a couple of scientists working at one firm that messed with some emails or something, or some kind of data about climate change. You don't think you're going to find criminals in every group? So if two people lie to you in your life, you should never believe anybody again, right? I mean, that's the logic. Nobody's telling the truth. If those two didn't, nobody could be. That's a hell of a leap, folks. Make sure to look at the people you're listening to and look at them hard. Look at their record. Look at the evidence they provide. What Deepak Chopra just did was say, God of the gaps. That's what he said to me. God of the gaps. We've got no understanding here, therefore God. And if you listen to him more deeply, he says there's this huge sea of consciousness out there that we all came from and will return to. And I don't know if he defines it as consciousness, but he did it one time. I remember hearing him say it. And basically, he said, think of it like a sea. These waves are rising and falling. You're in there with all these other consciousnesses and so much more than just other consciousnesses. And you're connected at all times, just like the atoms in the water are. And you may not have a direct connection, but you have at least an indirect connection to everything in the universe. And that was a lot for me to try to absorb. But what he was missing, and what he continues to be missing from his arguments, is both context that can bring it into our vernacular and evidence. Evidence. It's fun to believe in this stuff. I'd love to believe there's an amazing God with an amazing heaven, and I could go fucking camping and playing hockey and just fucking shooting at cats with Nerf bows and arrows. That'd be fun. I mean, I've never done that, but it would be fun, especially if the cats were smooth so that the arrows would stick, the little suction cup arrows. That'd be fun. I want to do that in heaven if I go. But I'm thinking no. I'm thinking that's unlikely at this point. If there is an afterlife, which is a huge leap for me, I'm betting that the conscious thought does not survive. That perhaps your essence of who you are, this mysterious thing we haven't figured out how to define yet, and may not at all be stuff, maybe something else, maybe an energy, then maybe that's real. And maybe that lives on and transforms and gets into other things or creatures or even different realities. I mean, separate dimensions that we have not learned yet how to detect. All of these things are possible, but I have to go only on this very limited logic that I have as a human being. And it is limited. And all of our knowledge is limited. And all of our maths and sciences and languages are limited at any given time. We'll never know it all. But what we know right now compared to what we could know in the whole universe, we're at the less than 1% mark, folks. You can estimate that safely with math. We're at the less than 1% mark, and we think we know some shit. What a shame. We got a lot to learn. Let's accept that we're babes in the woods, that we have learned some things that we can count on, but most shit we don't know anything about. Socrates said it, only one thing that I know, that is that I know nothing. And I think that he was wise above his years. And, he's one of my heroes. I got to admit it. And he's part of who creates my bias. People like that help to create my bias. Immanuel Kant, Pythagoras, Thomas Jefferson, JFK, William Wallace. These people all work into my thinking model because I have this huge amount of respect for them. And you can question all day whether the respect came from my preconceived notions and them fitting into it, or whether they built my notions and now I fit into their views. That's up to you. You go ahead and wrestle with that one. I'm just settling with how they are related, my bias and those men's thinking. And that's just the way it is. Bias is a bitch. It does make you. Andrew's back in the chat. Andrew, I don't know if you happened to catch that little battle between Dr. Michael Shermer and Dr. Deepak Chopra, but we have this constant thing going on when you have, say, atheists battling with non-atheists, or with these really logical thinkers battling with spiritual thinkers. We have this common thing going on where the logical thinker always has an advantage. Why? Because anytime he gets uncomfortable with an argument, he can demand evidence. And that may not be the way to think, not to get to the real truth. Because even that logical thinker should be able to admit that there's a buttload of shit we don't know yet. So how can you necessarily say on the surface that the spiritual thinker has nothing to offer to the conversation? That spiritual thinker may have had a spiritual experience that was very real and is trying to relay to you what happened in that experience and what he learned from it. And you're saying bullshit, can't prove it in the lab. See, there's an in-between here. And there's almost always a gray area. And we have to find a way to walk that listens to all people and doesn't dismiss so easily. However, when you're being deceived or when you're being talked to by somebody that doesn't know shit, that's pretending to know shit, you need to be able to identify those people and get them out. You don't have time for that. You don't have time for bad sources. Kick them out unless they're entertaining. If they're entertaining you, go for it. You want to listen to Bill O'Reilly all day long? Go for it. He's a fun guy to watch. He's got a lot of energy, but he's not bringing you a whole shitload of facts. I can tell you that. If you don't believe that, check up on him. Go to the source. Find out. Now, you have somebody like a Jon Stewart who's kind of a polar opposite of Bill O'Reilly. Well, I think Colbert would be a better polar opposite. He's presenting better news, but once he gets into the opinion, he's crazier than Bill O'Reilly. He's just leaning more to the left usually. Colbert is decidedly left. I wish there was somebody more in the middle, truly in the middle, that could help us digest our news. But that would be someone without bias, wouldn't it? And I don't know a human without bias. Even if it's secret on the DL, people on NPR that try so hard to stay absolutely neutral in their story presentation are still going to lean one way or the other. And I heard a field reporter the other day say, remember Al Gore, the one that invented the internet? And then someone else say something about George Bush's intelligence. They're biased. Everybody's biased. If people could be honest and come out and just identify and label themselves with a kind of a golf handicap, here's my bias, this is where I'm coming in from, you can apply that. And you can begin to say, okay, well, he's already said he's center-left, which is what I am. So I expect him to show a little bias toward the center-left area because he believes that's the real center. Where you are on the political scale, you believe that's the center, or you wouldn't be there. The center is what's right. So when I'm talking about the political scale, just like they said earlier in the clip, there's a bell curve. And in the middle of that is where most people are. I'm in the center of that scale. So that's what we're calling normal or average. But is it normal or average? Is it normal or average compared to 1,000 years ago, or will it be in 1,000 years from now? No, not at all. The whole thing's going to move. But my center can only be based on what I think is right based on what I've learned. What else? Genetics, maybe? A predisposition to lean one way or the other politically? A predisposition to value certain things over others, which can feed directly into political views? Sure, that could all be at play. How can you rule that out? I mean, the experiments are showing that genes play as much of an important role in your psychology as environment. And they're proving it. They've got a study going right now with 2 astronauts, one in space, one not. And they're identical twins. And these are awesome studies. This is revealing some real science about how space is going to affect humans, because unless you have something like identical twins who are shown to be in pre-launch experiments to be identical in every way, and then you test them after and during the one twin's departure to space while monitoring their activity to make sure that they stay the same, and you limit the external interference with the exception of being in space and having more radiation and things like that, then you begin to learn how much environment is affecting something over how much it's just genes or time passing, whatever. Time passing has caused me to come to just about the end of this show, but I did have one more tiny clip I wanted to play for you, and it was not that one. Where is it? Cognitive bias. Yeah, I got a little bit of a disagreement with this guy, so let's play this real quick and then we'll get out of here. This is Cognitive Biases 101 with Peter Bowman. I want you to hear what he has to say. This is on Big Think, which is a pretty good series you'll find on, I know you can find it on YouTube. I'm not sure where else. It might be on A&E or Biography or some shit like, I don't know. But anyway, here's this. Listen to this and we'll come.
Biases are one of the most interesting phenomena in evolution. And I would go as far as saying there's nothing that's not a bias. I mean, we're biased to live in a certain temperature range, and we prefer sweet food over bitter food. So biases are essential. They really guide us in a broader sense, so that we don't hurt ourselves. A bias towards feeling solid ground rather than wobbling ground.
See, I've got to interrupt them already because I don't want someone to tune into this and fast forward and get to this and think I'm presenting it as fact. I think this guy's really confusing bias with preference. See if you can see where he leaves bias and goes into preference, and there is a difference. Let's get back to it.
The interesting thing is really not to try to do away with these biases, but to really recognize them and not to see them as something negative, and yet to really understand that they cloud our clear thinking. That goes anywhere from self-deception to uniqueness bias, that we think, hey, I'm one of the first ones to think I'm very unique. Basically the brain evolved for us to make ourselves special, to think of us as valuable. Otherwise, we would not be able to go through the strains and the struggles and difficulties of life. So biases, in any case, negativity bias, positive bias, confirmation bias, all of these are so ingrained in us that we don't even see them. They are kind of transparent for us. So the way that I like to look at it is the more we can detect them and become aware of it, it's kind of a hide and seek. They come out of left field. And the more we can become aware of them and discover them, it's actually quite amusing how we twist reality in a way that confirms our particular view of the world. And so I don't see them as something that's obstructing a healthy, good, positive life. But it narrows the window. And the more we become aware of them, the broader we can approach and the closer we can get to reality. Well, confirmation bias is probably one of the most pronounced biases that we have. And anybody who has ever bought a car and thought for a while about what kind of car they want to buy they probably notice suddenly, oh yeah, there's that car again. And suddenly the brain kind of detects in the environment something that confirms